Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Strategy and Technology, a Practical Primer. We are in week 5 discussing the theme of buyers, suppliers and competitors. Today's lecture, the 21st in the series, concentrates on buyer power. Buyers, otherwise known as customers or consumers, are an important constituent of an organizational ecosystem within the industry. They are external to the organization, but they are the very purpose of an organization's existence. They do require superior products and superior services. They do not tolerate low quality products or services. However, this pressure from the buyers should not be viewed as competition with the firm. The firm should never look at dominating the buyers through competitive means. The firm should see how it can satisfy the consumers, how it can satisfy the buyers, and use their expectations as levers for improving the firm's own competitiveness. Wise and effective leaders therefore focus really well on only a few things to lead their corporations to glory. Product design and product development which satisfies the customers beyond their expectations would rank the highest in that list. Product or service is the bridge between the firm and its customers. We cannot allow theories to drive a wedge between the firm and the customers. The only way a firm can benefit from the buyer power is in a positive manner, developing products and services that exceed customer expectations and create new experiences for customers. In this process, the firm also upgrades its product design, manufacturing capability, service delivery capability, and becomes a more competitive contributor to socio-economic development. Buyer power and firm competitiveness are interlinked. Buyer power can be low or can be high. Buyer power is low when suppliers have proprietary technology, when their financial position is very strong, and the suppliers themselves are limited in number. Buyer power is also low when the company has no alternative other than depend on the suppliers to buy their products. In the case of individuals, the buyer power is generally not very high because they are forced to buy most of the products they need from the marketplace. Buyer power is high when the buyer has the ability to offer very high volumes and therefore negotiate for driven down pricing. Buyer power also will be high when the suppliers are weak and they are fragmented in terms of supplier industry structure. The buyer power tends to be high when the buyer is able to say to the supplier that if the supplier doesn't offer the products the way the buyer wants, then the buyer could make in-house those products. Together with the other four competitive forces, buyer power determines the level of competitiveness in an industry. If we extend this theory further, most industries sell their products or services not to a single buyer but to a range of buyers in the industry relating to the industry. The bargaining power of the buyers, whether they are of individual consumer type or business consumer type, would be the strongest when use that force in aggregate terms. The postulate that buyer power is a competitive force should not be misinterpreted to mean that the firm should be in competition with the buyers and find out ways and means of reducing the buyer power. It is always better for the company to respect the buyer requirements, buyer sentiments, and go one step ahead of meeting those requirements with proper engagement of the buyers. This concept of buyer power varying across the whole spectrum of the industry is relevant for producer goods as well as consumer goods. Whenever a new product arrives, the pricing tends to be on the higher side. The proprietary nature of new technologies, the limited number of suppliers, and dependence on imported components and technologies do cause increases in prices. However, large buyer groups exert positive pressure not merely on the firm but on the entire ecosystem to support viability. Solar energy is a classic example of how buyer power can cause positive pressure on industry, even if that industry is a sunrise industry, and the related broader ecosystem. When solar energy manufacture started a decade ago in India, the tariff was Rs 15 per kilowatt hour. Power utilities and discoms were slow to accept such pricing level. Some governments as buyer power groups sought reductions explicitly. Some others signed PPAs, that is power purchase agreements, but put in clauses to say that as time progresses, as technology develops, the per kilowatt hour price should be lower. This aggregate buyer power caused the solar industry and the central government to become aware of the need to adopt technological efficiency and cost competitiveness as a way of improving the renewable energy production in the country. Now the industry and the government are focused on scaling up and incentivizing renewable energy production on one hand, and building a domestic manufacturing base for solar energy components, because their pricing, their availability dictates the costs of solar energy projects and therefore the cost of power supplied through such facilities. Over time, you can see that many companies have come in to the renewable energy field. We can talk about Adani very commonly, but Acme Solar, Greenco, Azure, Renew, Tata Power are all into renewable energy. As I said, the buyer group exerts pressure to make the pricing more affordable. It is not because of any intent other than keeping the buyer viability itself at a higher level. The trajectory of lowest solar tariffs in India proves this point. Over a period of 2015 to 2020, we can see that the pricing has reduced by at least 50%. Different buyer groups, even when they are common to an industry, they vary widely in terms of their purchasing needs with respect to various factors. In terms of performance, features, the performance of the product itself, durability and reliability, quality determine how buyers perceive a product. However, market support factors that are unleashed by the company relating to promotion, warranty, spare parts and service cause changes in buyer perceptions. So the customer experience is dependent on A. product performance, B. product price, C. service assurance, D. product promotion, if we aggregate all the factors into 4 buckets. However, market segmentation is not just segmentation that is based on specifications, it is much broader. Buyers differ not only in terms of their structural position and strategic orientation, but also in terms of their growth potential. A firm has to choose its own recipe of broad versus narrow segmentation and what kind of buyers it should target for its growth journey. Industry may be homogeneous in terms of the products broadly, but buyers are always heterogeneous. A country's population is heterogeneous. Market segmentation is an effort by the firms to reduce the heterogeneity to manageable limits so that the company is able to serve the products the segments want. That is, the fit between the firm and the marketplace could be improved with better segmentation. A key strategic implication is that a firm can not only find good buyers but also create them. If you segment the market well, you can even create a new segment of buyers. When Samsung brought out the large phones, it created a new market for the users of that particular type of large cell phone. So there is a framework which is based on 4 broad criteria to determine the quality of buyers from a strategic standpoint. First, purchasing need versus company capabilities. If the company capabilities are far broader than the purchasing needs, it is well within the company's outlook to create those products and create new market segments around those products. 2, growth potential. The higher the growth potential, the higher is the space as well as the motivation for a firm to come up with market segmentation and product segmentation in a broader frame of reference. The structural position, that is the scale, scope and other structural parameters determine both for the buyer groups as well as for company the appropriate fit. And finally, the cost of servicing. One can develop a huge number of products and products which are of high technology, but are they serviceable easily in the hands of the customers. These four factors are important to drive a buyer group from heterogeneity to homogeneity, and for firms to use market segmentation as a tool to achieve homogeneity within the heterogeneity. Different market segments within a market will have different levels of bargaining power, and those segments will try to exercise those powerful forces by demanding low prices with higher features. But whether they will be able to enforce the buyer power depends on the factors which we have discussed earlier, that is the proprietary technologies, the strength of the buyers, the strength of the suppliers, the fragmentation of the buyers, the fragmentation of the suppliers, and so on. I give here an example of market segmentation. If you compare what Galaxy and other divisions of Samsung cell phones business offers, you will find that the number of phones on offer is several times over what Apple offers. Apple has much simpler product range, and Apple believes that the product is so universal in its appeal that there is no real need to segment the market beyond some reasonable limits. On the other hand, Samsung believes that it should segment the market as finely and at times as confusingly as possible. That's why you will find that not only Galaxy S10 range or S20 range now and Note 20 range is available even in the high-end segment, but there are several other budget level phones, A series, M series, F series, FE series, and so on. And along with that, we have feature phones also offered by Samsung, with specifications ranging from 1 GB memory to 1 TB memory and 2 MP camera to 108 MP camera, and steep gradients on a host of features and prices varying from Rs 10,000 to even Rs 1,20,000. Samsung segments the mobile phone market as no other manufacturer does. That has been supportive of Samsung being near number one position or in number one position for several years. You can see the comparison of the Samsung phones, though not the very recent ones. You will find that display quality, build quality, memory capacity, main camera capacity, selfie camera capacity, battery capacity are some of the factors which lead to market segmentation. A combination of these six aspects of a cell phone could lead to multiple combinations and multiple permutations for creating new market segments. As with the other aspects of the theory of competitive strategy, the propositions on buyer power and buyer selection need to be revised to align with the current times. What are the current times? Firms cannot exist without looking at company requirements. What are the new requirements? The new requirements are that contemporary buyers are much more informed and much more agile than the previous generation of customers. Information is available on a very open platform, be it Google or any other search platform. So this makes continuous updation in technology, continuous updation in product features an essential requirement for firms to sustain themselves in the marketplace. We can no longer select our products and services from the point of view of the firm offering what it can. Instead, the products and services have to be design thought from what the customer experiences are and what customer expectations are. So firms cannot try to find out those gaps between the market segments and try to fill them, or find out when and how a customer group is weak. Therefore, why not I offer a previous generation product and so on. Markets are created by products, but certainly experiences are becoming far more important than just products in the new buyer dynamic paradigm. To be able to successfully manage the buyer dynamics, we need to understand the nature of the buyers and also the nature of the markets. Basically, four combinations are possible when we look at the buyers as industrial buyers and as individual buyers. When a product is made to meet the needs of individual buyers, it becomes B2C commerce. On the other hand, if a product satisfies the industrial requirement, it becomes a B2B commerce. While buyers are of individual nature and industrial nature, the markets in which the buyers are situated could be emerging markets or developed markets. So there are 4 principles which are involved in this combination. Industrial buyers who are in emerging markets tend to be weighed down by cost factors because capital is not available in plenty. Therefore, projects have to be established with frugal engineering. Similarly, projects have to be run on lean principles. Therefore, the emphasis on lowest bidding as the criterion for selection of suppliers is very much in vogue in the emerging markets. Individual buyers who are situated in emerging markets do not have those restrictions, but they are also restricted in different ways. Family, friends, and other social factors influence individual buyer interests very strongly in emerging markets. When the entire community is of, let's say, middle income category and they don't want to go beyond a television size of 55 inches, there is very little inspiration or motivation for an individual to go in for a 75-inch TV or even the latest micro LED TV. Those things do not happen because social factors, family factors influence individual buyers to a far greater degree than they would influence in the developed markets. When industrial buyers and developed markets combine, there are several firm level SOPs that need to be respected. It is not only about cost, it is also about quality, it is also about the asset maintenance and the supplier credibility, financial rating. So these standard operating procedures for buyer groups to operate in industrial segment of the developed markets are far more structured, far more system driven. When you look at individual buyers in developed markets, every purchase is influenced more or less by esteem factors. There is a desire in the developed world to be differentiated. This is one of the reasons why the premium accessories, the premium perfumes, and several other high-end products get developed first in the developed markets for individual buyers. That is also one of the reasons why, despite the openness of information today, the products that are available in the developed world are 1 or 2 shades of higher level than the products available or the Indian marketplace or any other marketplace in the emerging markets. Therefore, the strategies for addressing buyer groups must distinguish between the types of buyers, that is consumer buying or industrial buying. You should also distinguish between the environmental or economic context, that is the emerging market context or the developed world context. Within that, the producer goods or consumer goods have different levels or flavors of these factors that we have discussed so far. So the intersection of purchasing power and buyer preference leads to a complex clustering of buyer groups. How do you fulfill the needs of the buyers? We have discussed how we can categorize the buyers in terms of their product characteristics and selling approaches and also the nature of the markets. But the second principle is that every buyer has multiple needs that can be fulfilled only by full line manufacturers. Let's think of a compressor manufacturer. Any industrial plant would have the need for different types of compressors. If a compressor manufacturer says that I am only in the water-cooled compressor or in the air-cooled compressor, the manufacturer would not be able to get the full line orders from that industrial plant. In fact, even for the product in which the company is specialized, a full line manufacturer could outwit them and outbid them. So to be able to be a full line manufacturer is one of the important aspects of managing consumer power. An airliner may specialize in only one type of aircraft. When you look at the low-cost airliners such as SpiceJet, you will find that most of the aircraft are of the Bombardier type or of the small 2x2 option aircraft type. However, The manufacturer of aircrafts must be prepared to offer the aircrafts not only to such low-cost airliners but also to mid-range airliners and also the premium airliners. That is, to be able to manage the buyer power in a more homogeneous way, an aircraft manufacturer such as Boeing or Airbus must have a whole range of aircraft. It's quite possible that they may choose not to operate in one segment, which is one of the reasons why companies of the Bombardier type are more proficient and more established in the small aircraft range. That also gels well because such companies are combining the low-cost aircraft design with the private jet aircrafts which companies specialize in that range. Therefore, there is synergy the companies have been able to find out. So they see, ironically, their capabilities meeting not only the low-cost airliner requirement but also the high net worth individual, high net worth corporate requirements for private jetting. So that's how we need to understand the buyer principles from different angles and find out the best ways the company can fulfill the needs. Even a simple product such as a writing instrument has multiple need profiles within a single buyer group. For example, low-cost ballpoint pens are used for rough work. Gel pens are used for official or college writing. Fountain pens are used for signatures and premium pens as luxury accessories. You can see that a simple product such as pen has got multiple applications and therefore multiple ways this product is designed and manufactured and even marketed. Therefore, instead of trying to choose buyers based on products or services available, the right approach is to understand the products and services that are required and then create the product portfolio of the company. So if the company is able to study the buyer universe completely, make meaningful segmentation and find out the needs of each segment, it would be able to develop the appropriate product portfolio for itself and for the customers. But we have to be very conscious that this kind of selection cannot be static. Times do change, along with that the requirements do keep changing. Even in the case of aircrafts, the interior designs get standardized not because of the size of the aircraft but because everybody would like to avoid deep vein thrombosis for the patient. So to the extent possible, companies would need to have the ability to balance the seat pitch with the aircraft economics, and any company which innovates in this process could be probably having the design which is applicable to as many buyer segments as possible. These solutions to product market fit cannot be tactical. They should be strategic because the growth has to be sustainable and over the long time. Let's look at the power plant makers. So far, the Indian power plant makers had a cocooned life because most of the power utilities were taking the power plants from the state-owned undertakings and a few other companies which have been licensed to manufacture in India. However, with technology changing substantially, with climate change becoming the superordinate factor and renewable energy coming up in a big way, the entire energy industry is in a state of flux and there are points of inflection for the power utilities as well as for the power plant suppliers to look at new ways of meeting this requirement. Therefore, the product offerings can no longer be the same. The product offerings have to be looked at from the climate angle. Therefore, the electricity boards and national energy corporations are having large buyer group power to be able to decide the discourse in this direction and finally decide the pathway which the power plant producers would take in future. There would be, in a large country such as India, the requirement for all kinds of power plants, thermal, hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, and these would be titrated in terms of micro, medium, large, mega and ultra mega power projects. However, the ratios are changing, the mix of technologies is changing, and the need for the power plant producers to look at the customers, that is the environmental protection. The customer here is the environmental protection. The need to look at environmental protection far more empathetically has arisen in the energy industry. This is the flip of the proposition that is taking place not only in the energy industry but in several other industries. So how do we ensure that we are in the right place? Very intuitively, companies should follow those groups which have got high growth rate. There is no point in a company in specializing or getting stuck with segments which have low growth. But that cannot be extended very much, because in marketplaces, high growth and low growth products tend to be intertwined. Even companies such as Apple have been late to recognize that what could be a low growth market could in future be the high growth market. In Steve Jobs' time, India was seen as a more complex market with low growth potential, and Apple did not make a presence felt in the Indian market. However, Tim Cook took a different view, and Apple had its business handsomely paid out due to the change in perception. So what was a slow growth market for Apple became a high growth market in later times. So trying to run only with high growth markets of the times would not be helpful. Low growth markets also have to be looked at. Again, flipping the proposition, companies have to devise ways and means in which the low growth markets can be converted into high growth markets with appropriate products, appropriate services, and the overall strategic marketing approach for those kinds of products. India is not only at the cusp of a new GDP growth rate, but also at the cusp of a transformation in consumer requirements and consumer tastes. And the changing demographics in favor of young population is also going to drive the requirements of a new generation of products and services. So consumers would be far more powerful in India in future times as well, and firms have to find out ways and means of meeting the consumer power. Combating or collaborating, that should be the main dilemma the companies must have, and without any doubt, firms cannot be in combative mode with reference to the customers. At the most basic level, a company collaborates with the customer through the trade channels. That is, the dealer format is one of the most important areas where customers and the firm get together. There are several display formats that are available, and those would differ for industrial buyers and for consumer buyers. However, each should provide a distinctive user experience. When Royal Enfield tried to upgrade its dealership network, it looked at a dealer format which appeals to that segment of consumers who want to belong to a community. So a kind of club architecture was made for the new dealerships to appeal to the Royal Enfield high-end bikes. Similarly, periodic connectivity through conferences and corporate sales plans as well as exhibitions is vital for a company to stay in touch with its customers. Firms must be geared to co-experience with users through such platforms where the company and the buyers can be present on real-time basis. This would lead to better need identification for product development and improvement. In between these two extremes, we have intermediate level methodologies such as consumer feedback, trade channel feedback, service center feedback, market research, the warranty claims, the after service purchase of parts, all of those things. These provide insights to improve products and services for customers. Even if the existing products already into the market cannot be improved, new generations of products can vastly benefit from the feedback that arises from these kinds of interactions. The buyer being the cause and sustenance for the genesis and growth of the firm. The appropriate proposition for the firm would be to continuously engage with the buyers to serve them better. Such engagement, as I said, would take several forms, from dealerships to exhibitions and conferences to structured feedback. One of the powerful concepts on collaborating with the consumers was propounded by Dr. C.K. Prahalad, as he wrote the book The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. His proposition was that income is pyramidal, high net worth individual, middle income people, and a vast base of low income consumers. His proposition is that A company cannot afford to ignore the bottom of the pyramid consumers. In fact, by understanding consumer needs and user characteristics in different economic strata, more particularly at the bottom of the pyramid, the different cultures, different practices can be better understood by the company, and firms can re-engineer their products and open up completely new markets. Prahlad, in fact, went to the extent of saying that bottom of the pyramid consumers are micro-innovators, micro-producers, micro-financiers, and micro-customers who together would have significant power for guiding the destinies of a company. The success of the Japanese and Korean automobile manufacturers in India from the 1980s to 2000s was due to a buyer-centric adaptation. Japanese upgraded their cars to meet the higher ground clearance requirements of the Indian road conditions, and also to enhance the internal profile to fit the Indian requirements for 5 people to sit in a sedan, and also to ensure that the seat pitch is of such nature that the Indian ergonomic profile is catered to in a proper manner. Over the last several years, in fact, a generation of automotive makers from Europe has been targeting exclusive niche segments with their luxury car products, although they do not meet the requirements of the larger resource-constrained Indian market segments. Sooner or later, many of these companies will have to recognize the need for moving away from an obsession with luxury products and going to products which meet the bottom of the pyramid customer requirements. This will make the companies positively engaged and also socially responsible. Full-line automakers are far more relevant to the Indian context than only luxury car makers. The final concept that we need to think of is that employees of a company are also buyers. Leaders also are designers. These are the two concepts we will discuss. Generally, buyers are seen as individual buyers and industrial buyers. Those who live within the company are not considered buyers. A Tata Group has got 700,000 employees globally, and several big companies have 50,000 to 100,000 employees within their employment easily. But the general feeling of the employees as well as the firm is that the employees must use only the firm's products. Questions of emotion relating to loyalty to the company come in. But if you imagine a situation where an employee is free and emotionally independent to exercise the choice, the freedom of choice of buying any product of any company, you will find that employee base of the company is actually a mini universe of the marketplace for the company. The company will be able to get much feedback from the buyer group of the company itself on not only the company's products but also on other companies, other competitors' product. Many firms therefore fail to realize that their own employees are buyers too. Company must focus on getting valuable feedback from its employees on all aspects of current and potential aspects of buyer characteristics. The consideration of employees as buyers has got several benefits. One, it provides the opportunity to interact with customers, read buyers, read employees, and discover how the products they make or are associated with fare in the hands of customers. If the employees buy not only the firm's products but also others' products and provide feedback, the relative performance of the firm and the competitor products can be benchmarked easily. That itself is the biggest market research effortlessly undertaken by a firm. Third, when all employees are involved in this kind of own buying related market research, that feedback can flow through the organization very easily. There could be institutionalization of such market-centric behavior and feedback. We must recognize that Japanese mastered this fine art of employee market interface in the 1970s and 1980s and achieved amazing impact. Koreans did it from the 1990s. Potentially, leading emerging economies such as India and China have the opportunity to make their organizations customer integrated, for enhanced competitiveness. Companies must create unique products to ride the wave, not only look at their own loyal customer base, but also looking at the base of customers loyal to other competitor products. One of the ways in which an employee can drive product transformation is brought out by the Sony PlayStation example. There was a junior staff member called Ken Kutaragi in the late 90s. He had this penchant for tinkering with products. He created a chip to make his daughter's Nintendo game more powerful and provide a better gaming experience. Nintendo console, to be correct. He went to his bosses with the idea of creating a new console for Sony, but he hit a wall. Sony just didn't do gaming, people felt, and they felt that this gaming industry was just a fad. Remember, it was in the 1980s. Refusing to give up, Kutaragi reached Sony's CEO, Norio Oga. Increasingly aware of the value of the gaming industry, Oga kicked off a joint venture with Nintendo. Licensing disagreements meant that the partnership eventually faded. But Sony understood the utility of the gaming industry and continued to develop its own console, the PlayStation. The PlayStation was launched in 1994 and sold 500 million units since then. Probably it will reach one of these days 2 billion or 3 billion units. Kutaragi went on to become the chairman and CEO at Sony, and no one at Sony questioned the credibility of the gaming industry anymore. One of the quotes attributed to him was that, "I wanted to prove that even a regular company employee could build something big." That's the kind of innovation that should exist in the employees, inspiration that should be provided by the companies and the superiors. If employees of companies are self-motivated or encouraged to understand user needs better and follow such understanding with more innovative product or service development, there would be positive impact on creation and shaping of buyer groups. Sony's is a great example. The entire business vertical has been built on a junior employee's innovation, who of course was rewarded with the highest possible position in Sony hierarchy. Leaders also have a special place as designers. They have to understand buyers primarily. I have this favorite example of my own global CEO, Mike Ball. When he took over Hospira Inc., he did not talk to the facilities. He went and talked to the customers all across the globe, and that provided valuable feedback of what goes right with the product and what may not go right with the product. And that was a valuable feedback for the entire quality system of the company and the upgradation of the product and manufacturing portfolio. Wise leaders would view buyers as a group that enhances the firm's competitiveness through higher expectations, rather than as a group that makes unjustified demands on company resources. Here we have the photo of Sakichi Toyoda, father of Kishiro Toyoda, founder of Toyota Motor Corporation. He was the first person to understand the importance of automobiles, and in 1959 the first Toyota car line-off from Motomachi plant occurred. Toyota and Nissan leaders visited America, which was by then far more advanced in automobile manufacture compared to Japan in the post-war situation. They learned and they listened to the consumers to create superior automobile manufacturing ecosystems in Japan. Leaders who truly internationalize their firms on a multi-country basis, as opposed to home country-centric internationalization, provide their firms with unprecedented opportunities to develop expansive product market configurations. There are only a few things which wise and effective leaders must focus on to lead their corporations to glory. Product design and development probably ranks the highest in that list. Steve Jobs and Apple constitute an outstanding example. Steve's genius lay in the fact that he could visualize, he could perceive customers' minds and their requirements even before customers themselves became aware of those requirements. The second part of his genius lay in designing products which had a universal appeal, from highly developed markets to low-income markets, and highly placed affluent individuals to low-income indigent customers. Segmentation as defined for decades by marketing gurus, usually either in terms of the end nature of the specification or the income categorization, had no relevance for Apple products and customers. iPhone, for example, has a universal appeal. A CEO of a company doesn't feel it inappropriate if the chauffeur of the car has iPhone. Similarly, the chauffeur doesn't feel embarrassed that he has the same device which his superior, the CEO of the company, has. And Steve Jobs' magic was there. That is creation of a universal product which appealed to all segments of a marketplace. The original iPhone was introduced by Steve Jobs on January 9, 2007 at the Macworld Conference and Expo that was held in San Francisco. In his address, Jobs said, "This is a day that I have been looking forward to for 2.5 years," adding that today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. He introduced the iPhone as a combination of 3 devices, the first articulation of convergence as a philosophy of product development, a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communicator, and it was priced at that point of time pleasantly at $199. Collaborators and competitors have been one in praising the enormous transformation Steve Jobs brought about in the deployment of digital technology to improve and enhance everyday living. To summarize, we have to look at buyer groups and their bargaining power in a positive sense. We have to see the buyer groups as the groups that will elevate companies' performance through certain positive pressure. It is certainly counterintuitive and antithetical to take the words at their face value, that is the competitive power of buyers at its face value, and view the company and the buyers as being pitted against the other. They have a shared and aligned purpose to grow together in contrast. Second, recognizing that the buyer power can be overwhelming, companies must find positive and proactive ways of engaging and integrating with customers for a better user experience, rather than just managing them for better sales. And in this process, companies can gain a lot by leveraging employees as virtual buyers and leaders as virtual designers. This will be a win-win situation for the companies and the customers, both strategically and tactically. Leadership in product development and delivery would be a core component of a company that treats customers as a genuine and fundamental corporate resource. It is also a core leadership task. With this, we come to the end of our discussion on buyer power or consumer group power. We will meet again in the next lecture.